Today, we explore one of the most profound relationships in the history of philosophy, that of Plato and Aristotle. Their relationship forms the cornerstone of much Western philosophy, particularly in metaphysics, ethics, politics, and logic. While Aristotle was a student of Plato, his work diverged in significant ways, leading to some of the most compelling debates in philosophy. As we examine their continuity and divergence, we'll reference critical dialogues and works such as Plato's Republic, Phaedo, and Aristotle's Metaphysics and Nicomachean Ethics. These texts will serve as our foundation for understanding how Aristotle built upon and critiqued Plato's ideas. I strongly encourage you to immerse yourself in these primary texts. Without closely reading these works, you might miss the intricate ways Aristotle developed his ideas in response to Plato. For instance, in the Republic, we see Plato exploring the theory of forms and the ideal state. At the same time, Aristotle, in the Metaphysics, directly challenges the existence of forms in a separate realm, arguing instead that forms are intrinsic to the objects themselves. Engaging with these dialogues, especially the Phaedo and Nicomachean Ethics, will deepen your understanding of their views on ethics and the nature of the good. Plato's vision of the good as an abstract form contrasts with Aristotle's more practical approach, where the good is tied to human flourishing or eudaimonia. As we progress through this lecture, remember that Aristotle often dialogues with his teachers, reflecting both reverence and criticism. This dynamic is not just an academic exercise. It highlights the evolution of philosophical thought and its relevance to our understanding of the world today. Let's explore continuity and divergence, and as always, feel free to share your thoughts and questions as we unravel the philosophical relationship between these two towering figures.
Lecture 26. Plato's Influence on Aristotle. Continuity and Divergence. Today, we will be exploring one of the most fascinating relationships in the history of philosophy, that between Plato and his most famous student, Aristotle. This relationship is critical to understanding the foundations of Western philosophy, as well as the development of many fields, including metaphysics, ethics, politics, and logic. While Aristotle was a student of Plato, his work is often characterized by a divergence from Plato's ideas, leading to debates about the nature of their influence on each other. In this lecture, we'll delve into the continuities and divergences between Plato and Aristotle. We will discuss areas where Aristotle builds upon Plato's thought and where he directly critiques or modifies his teacher's philosophy. Along the way, we will be using references from the Republic, Phaedo, Metaphysics, and Nicomachean Ethics, among others, to illuminate these points. 1. The influence of Plato on Aristotle, the shared language of forms. To begin, let's address the most significant and central concept shared by Plato and Aristotle, the theory of forms, or ideas, eidos. In Plato's philosophy, forms are abstract, perfect, and unchanging entities that exist beyond the physical world. They serve as the true reality, of which the physical world is merely an imperfect reflection. This concept is best exemplified in Plato's Republic, particularly in the allegory of the cave, Republic 514a, 520a. In the cave analogy, Plato describes prisoners who can only see shadows on a wall, believing them to be reality, until one prisoner escapes and sees the true forms in the light of the sun. Plato uses this allegory to explain the philosopher's journey toward knowledge and the distinction between the world of appearances and the world of forms. Aristotle, however, while greatly influenced by Plato's theory, eventually rejects the notion of forms existing in a separate, transcendent realm. He believes that forms do not exist independently of things, but are intrinsic to the things themselves. Aristotle's Metaphysics, Metaphysics 990a20 999ub15, critiques Plato's theory, especially the separation of forms from physical entities. According to Aristotle, if forms are separate from things, it becomes difficult to explain how they relate to the physical world. He argues that the form of an object must be embedded within the object itself. This leads to his hylomorphic theory, in which every substance is a combination of form, morph, and matter, hyle. Despite this fundamental disagreement, Aristotle's conception of form is still indebted to Plato. Without Plato's articulation of the forms, Aristotle's theory would lack a critical reference point. Aristotle's philosophy can be seen as an extension of Plato's thought, but grounded in a more empirical and naturalistic framework. 2. Ethics, the good and virtue in Plato and Aristotle. When we move to the ethical realm, Plato and Aristotle again share some fundamental concerns, but diverge in significant ways. Plato's ethical theory revolves around the concept of the good, which is the highest form and the source of all other forms. In the Republic, Plato identifies the good as the ultimate aim of human life and the foundation for moral action. Republic 505a, 509b. For Plato, to know the good is to know how to live a virtuous and just life. Virtue, in turn, is connected to the knowledge of the forms, especially the good. Plato suggests that virtue is a form of knowledge, and only those who grasp the true nature of the good can act virtuously. Aristotle takes a more practical and human-centered approach in his Nicomachean Ethics. While he agrees with Plato that the good is central to ethics, he defines it in more concrete terms. Aristotle's conception of the good is eudaimonia, often translated as happiness or flourishing. Unlike Plato, Aristotle does not believe that knowledge of abstract forms leads to virtue. Instead, he argues that virtue is a matter of habit and practice. For Aristotle, virtues are acquired through the development of good habits, and moral knowledge is practical, not theoretical. Nicomachean Ethics, 1103a15, 1103b25. A crucial divergence between the two thinkers is how they understand the relationship between the individual and the community in achieving the good. Plato's Republic envisions an ideal city in which individual interests are subordinated to the needs of the collective. Justice is achieved when everyone performs their designated role in the social order. Republic 433a, 444e. Aristotle, however, places greater emphasis on individual moral development. In the Politics, he argues that the city exists to enable individuals to achieve their highest potential, but this development occurs primarily through the cultivation of personal virtues, rather than through strict adherence to a collective vision. Politics, 1252b27, 1253a39. 3. Politics, the ideal city and practical governance. Political philosophy is another area where Plato and Aristotle share interests but diverge in their conclusions. Plato's vision of the ideal city, as presented in the Republic, is famously hierarchical and governed by philosopher kings, those who have achieved the highest knowledge of the forms, particularly the form of the good. In Plato's ideal city, the rulers are philosophers, the soldiers are guardians, and the rest of the population is made up of producers who support the needs of the city. Republic 414b, 420a. Plato's city is highly structured, with strict divisions between classes, and he argues that justice is achieved when each class performs its designated role. Aristotle's political philosophy, as outlined in his Politics, is more pragmatic. He critiques Plato's vision for being too idealistic and unrealistic. Aristotle believes that political systems should be based on the actual conditions of human life, not on abstract ideals. He argues that the best political system is one that is balanced and moderate, combining elements of democracy and oligarchy. Politics 1289a, 1296b27. Unlike Plato, Aristotle does not believe in rigid class divisions or the rule of philosopher kings. He emphasizes the importance of the middle class in maintaining stability and justice in the city. While Plato's political thought is more utopian, Aristotle's is more grounded in observation and experience. Yet, Aristotle's political philosophy still owes much to Plato's Republic, in that both are concerned with the relationship between the individual and the state, the nature of justice, and the role of virtue in governance. 4. Knowledge and epistemology, the role of the soul and the senses. In terms of epistemology, Plato and Aristotle once again show both continuity and divergence. Plato's theory of knowledge is closely linked to his theory of forms. In the Meno, he introduces the idea of knowledge as recollection, suggesting that the soul is immortal and has access to the forms from past experiences before its embodiment in the physical world. Meno 81a, 86c. For Plato, true knowledge is of the forms, and this knowledge is achieved through intellectual insight rather than sensory experience. The senses, according to Plato, deceive us, leading us away from the truth of the forms. Republic 508D 509A. Aristotle, on the other hand, places much more emphasis on the role of the senses in acquiring knowledge. In his posterior analytics, he argues that all knowledge begins with sense perception, and that the mind abstracts universal principles from the data provided by the senses. Posterior Analytics 100A25, 100B10. For Aristotle, knowledge is empirical, and the process of knowing is inductive, moving from particular observations to general principles. Despite these differences, Aristotle's epistemology cannot be understood without reference to Plato. His critique of Plato's theory of recollection and his emphasis on sensory experience build upon the very foundation laid by Plato. Aristotle's concept of knowledge as abstraction is in many ways a response to Plato's theory of forms, showing the profound influence Plato had on his students' thinking. 5. Metaphysics, substance, and the question of being. Finally, let us turn to metaphysics. Plato's metaphysics is centered around the theory of forms, where the forms are eternal, unchanging, and separate from the material world. In the Timaeus, Plato presents the forms as the blueprint for the cosmos, created by a divine craftsman, or demiurge, who shapes the material world based on these eternal patterns. Timaeus 27d 31b. Aristotle's metaphysics, as laid out in his Metaphysics, rejects the idea that forms exist independently of the physical world. Instead, Aristotle introduces the concept of substance, which is a combination of form and matter. For Aristotle, being is not something that exists in a separate realm, but is present in the actual objects of the world. Each object has both matter, its physical existence, and form, its essence or purpose. Metaphysics 1029a2, 1035b25. This hylomorphic theory represents a major departure from Plato's dualism, where the world of forms and the physical world are sharply divided. Yet even here, Aristotle's metaphysics can be seen as a response to Plato's. Without Plato's articulation of the forms, Aristotle's concept of substance would lack a clear foil. The two philosophers share a deep concern with the nature of being and reality, but they approach these questions from radically different angles. Conclusion. In conclusion, the relationship between Plato and Aristotle is one of both continuity and divergence. Aristotle builds upon Plato's ideas, even as he critiques and modifies them. Whether it is in metaphysics, ethics, politics, epistemology, or the theory of forms, Aristotle's thought is in constant dialogue with his teachers. This dynamic relationship has shaped the development of Western philosophy, and its influence can still be seen in contemporary debates in philosophy, science, and political theory. While Aristotle famously departed from many of Plato's ideas, his work remains deeply rooted in the philosophical foundation that Plato laid. In understanding the complexities of their relationship, we gain a deeper appreciation for both thinkers and the enduring legacy of their ideas. Thank you, and I look forward to discussing your thoughts and questions on Plato and Aristotle